What was your scariest a second later and I would have died moment? Story 1. Outside my college dorm my freshman year there was this stoop that was half under the building, half out from under it. The building was 18 stories tall, so I'm sitting out there, sitting on the steps, not under the building, and I get up for no real reason and walk under the building. As soon as I get under the building, a huge sheet of glass falls right where I was sitting. Some idiots were messing around on the 11th floor and knocked a 1009 window pane out of its mooring. Story 2. I was walking into a Miller's Outpost, tells you the time period, and the M from the sign above the store fell down and hit me on the shoulder. It was a big glass sign. One moment sooner and it hits my head. Because it drew blood, the store offered to give me any item I wanted so I wouldn't sue. I chose an awful red cardigan. I was 16 and dumb. Story 3. My friend and I were taking an elevator down to the cafeteria in our dorm in college. For some reason, we were arguing about something when the doors opened, so we hung back for a second. Then the elevator dropped 2 floors with the doors open. I still dislike getting in out of elevators, and I do a weird running start every time. Edit. Happened in Canada, was an old building elevator, 1950s, second edit. We were in the elevator when it dropped, more terrified of the getting sliced in half aspect than the drop. Answer. That's scary and alarming. Spent a bit in the elevator industry. You mentioned college. I assume it was a very old building, like 80 years old? Add dorm kids beating the shoot out of it, and I could see a failure. Cabs built post-60s have multiple fail-safe systems that would actuate in the event of a failure. 2-floor drop is unusual for modern equipment. States have annual safety inspections on passenger elevators. Fines for non-compliance. You have a greater chance of winning the Powerball twice than falling to your passing in an elevator. Report any abnormalities. But the worst thing that will happen is you get stuck in the cab for a few hours while waiting for service fire to open up. Edit US only. Story 4. I passed out at work and came around in the hospital. They diagnosed a bleed on the brain and eventually decided to drill a hole in my skull to drain the fluid. Just as they were about to put me under, the phone rang. It was the head of neurology. I actually had a burst aneurysm. According to my doctor, I would have probably been dead seconds after they started the surgery. Story 5. I cannot confirm whether this would have been passing, however, it would have changed my and my parents' life like passing. I was about 6 or 7, and I went along with my mom to go train the new puppy we had. The training ground was quite far away from home, and I remember that it was a big field surrounded by a forest and a motorway on the side of it. I was told to stay in the car and play on my Game Boy, back when they were a thing, LOL. After an hour or so, I got bored, and I went to have a look at where my mom was with our puppy. The car park was a little while from the training ground, but I decided to walk towards her anyway. In the meantime, an older man, 30-ish, starts talking to me, and the naive little boy I talked back, regardless of all the times my mom told me to not talk to strangers. He convinced me I was going the wrong way and told me he would take me to my mom and puppy Has. We ended up by the motorway side, and we were about to walk down the bank to the side of the motorway where his car was parked. As I am about to disappear down the bank, I hear the loudest scream of my name from my mom. I look back and feel the grip of the man tighten on my hand, but I was just in time to get my hand out of his grip and run towards my mother. My mom runs past me to see where this guy is, but he had just got into his car and drove off. To this day, I still imagine about the what-if scenario and how close I was to being kidnapped and potentially eliminated. Answer. When I was around 7, 8, my mom brought my sister and I to a birthday party BBQ at my aunt's house. My aunt's backyard backed up to a golf course my sister and I were playing in the yard while my mom chatted with her friends. An older man approached us from the golf course and asked us to help him find golf balls. Sounded like fun, so we went with him to help. He led us further and further away from the party, had just told us to come with him into the woods to look there when we heard our mother screaming our names. I turned to look at her and saw her running after us. When I turned back, around the man was running off into the woods. It took me years to realize that he was probably attempting to kidnap my sister and I and do God knows what. Scary shoot. Story 6. When I was in junior high, I was carpooling with another kid and her mom. For a reason I can't fathom, she decided to race a transit train, hoping to get across the tracks before the train stopped traffic. She gunned the car. I was in the back seat screaming, "No!" She hit the train. Because I was in the back seat, I was injured the least. I had a pointy piece of metal pierce through my jeans and flesh until it hit bone. Had she been a second faster, the train would have hit us broadside and eliminate us all. Edit. To answer the questions. This was 1980. She was not charged or sued. It was labeled an accident. She and her daughter suffered broken bones, lacerations, and concussions. Because of the parental acrimony, I couldn't be friends with the girl anymore. The family moved away before the end of the school year. I know at the time her mom was still not working. I'm not sure if she ever went back to work. Clearly she had or had developed some kind of mental or emotional problem, which the accident probably made worse. I wondered if she was an alcoholic who began day drinking, but I never mentioned my suspicion to anyone. I needed crutches for a few months. Answer. My stepbrother and his sister were in a carpool and something similar happened. He was only a little kindergartner. His sister was in middle school. Apparently, though, in their situation the car got stuck or stalled on the tracks as a train was coming. The adult in charge got them all out of the vehicle, but instead of taking them far away, she had them all stand up against a very close-by building. When the train hit the car, it flung the vehicle into the group. Somehow, my stepbrother managed to not get hit by anything, but his sister was eliminated instantly. Horrible situation. Shattered the family. Story 7. My story is a second earlier and I would have died. Basically, I got T-boned by a van while riding my bicycle, missed me by a couple inches, destroyed the back of the bike, and threw me into traffic. Answer. I had a similar experience. A second earlier and it would have been bad. My dad and I were coming home from getting some stuff from the pharmacy. We come to a stoplight and are talking about how he liked his new job significantly more than his old one. I wouldn't remember this convo if we didn't nearly die. Anyway, this conversation kept my dad from going through the intersection as soon as the light turned green. We start to move forward, and all of a sudden, this car comes blazing through the red light to the side of us, literally missing us by like a couple of inches. Straight up froze. Us and my dad just kind of sat there for a moment or two. Naturally, I made a joke like, well, that could have gone worse, or something like that. In reality, I know we could have both been seriously injured or eliminate, but I guess my way of dealing with the threat of passing is to make jokes about it. Who knew? Story 8. When I was in middle school, I called my mom on my cell during lunch because my head hurt so badly I couldn't move. She was on speed dial. Well, the nurse came and brought me to the office for a checkup and some pain pills while I waited for my mom. We didn't live close. Nurse said no fever and to take me home and put me to bed. My mom watched me get into the truck and decided that maybe we should go to the hospital to be safe. By the time we reached the hospital, it was further than our home. My temp was at 104 and I was incapacitated. I had meningitis. If we went home and she put me to bed like the nurse suggested, I never would have woken up. Edit for detail. For those who keep asking, speculating, it was viral meningitis, the less severe form, but it progressed very quickly. I had no headache when I arrived at school. By lunchtime, I couldn't move on my own, and I couldn't see because light was too bright. The nurse came to get me, and I didn't have a fever. After waiting for my mom 10 minutes, and the 20-minute drive to the hospital and 10-minute wait at the hospital, it was at 104. Yes, we told the nurse after, but there was only some of the symptoms when I left school. She never gave me or my mother advice again, just told symptoms and gave pain meds. Answer: I had meningitis my freshman year of high school. I had stayed home from school for about 2 days because I had a fever and just felt like shoot. On the third day, I was laying down on the couch and just threw up everywhere, and that's when my parents took me to the clinic. We didn't know how bad it was until we went to the clinic, and the doctors started asking me to perform basic tasks like touch my nose, and in my brain I would comprehend it as touch my ear. That's when the doctors knew something was wrong, so they sent me to the hospital. The entire trip to the hospital consisted of my dad interrogating me to find out if I was on substances or something. I don't blame him because I probably was super out of it, but I had been sick for the past 3 days, so I didn't really understand. When we get to the hospital, they decide to do a CT scan, MRI, and a spinal tap. They realize I have meningitis and my dad apologizes to me. Also, I had braces at the time and they had to be removed before all the scans, so a few days later, when I'm off the substances they were giving me, I licked my teeth and realized something was wrong. I was so over my braces at the time I never bothered to go back. To my orthodontist. Story 9. A couple months ago, I was in a head-on collision with some dude on crack driving down the wrong side of the road with his headlights out. I was going probably around 50 before I saw him. Speed limit was 55, so that's my best guess. Saw him with a second or two of reaction time, managed to brake hard and swerve over, only bad enough to total my car. But I still walked away with nothing more than a sore neck. If I hadn't seen the dude, I don't doubt that I could have died or been seriously injured. Story 10. My wife was having a rough pregnancy. Tons of awful symptoms: swelling, tiredness, nausea, low blood pressure, high blood pressure, back pain. That morning glow never came. Last week the back pain was particularly bad, cripplingly bad. She couldn't get up for work, and she had what she described as air pressure in her stomach. Despite having a presentation she needed to host, she took the day off and we went to the OB. Saw the OB briefly, and she told us to go to the ER to make sure everything was okay, as it vaguely sounded like a pulmonary embolism. My wife couldn't take in a full breath and something was off, but we didn't know what. Cue the long wait at the ER, wanting to go home, and her thinking she could deal with the pain. We were hungry and tired. 10 hours later, ER cleared her. No pulmonary embolism in the lungs found, but there were elevated liver enzymes found in her blood test. So off we went to labor and delivery for a final blood pressure check before being released. They have to clear her also since she's pregnant. Cue the doctor working in LD coming to ask about her symptoms and the liver enzymes to clarify, and then taking over for the nurse and personally checking her blood pressure. Earlier in the ER, it was 130-something, high for pregnancy but not immediately concerning. But now it was 168. We aren't going home. She's not even getting up to the elevator. She gets wheeled upstairs and the OB gets called. The next bit happened quick. We're being asked a lot of questions about when the symptoms started, how far along she is. There's a sudden swarm of nurses around her, and there's a huge sense of urgency in the room. Blood pressure is now 18,693. She's being hooked up to the monitors, an IV to get platelets, and getting more blood drawn. She was about to get up to use the restroom, and a doctor sternly tells a nurse helping that she cannot be up right now. Our OB enters the room and breaks the news. My wife has severe preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome. She's giving birth right now. It's not safe for her or our baby. It's early, but there's no alternative. She's getting a steroid to help accelerate the development of our baby's lungs, and once the platelets are done being administered, we're going to the operating room. She had an emergency C-section, and we were parents at 29 weeks. If that LD doctor had not noticed her symptoms before she was cleared for release minutes later, she would have had a seizure, suffered organ failure, and died that same night. The last week has been surreal. We knew parenthood was coming, but not like this, or so soon. Our baby is stable in the NICU and my wife is recovering. T.O.Dar, pregnant wife, felt weird stomach pressure, got cleared from the ER and went to LD. Suddenly, emergency C-section. Going home would have been fatal. I'm a dad now. If you're pregnant and suddenly feel a weird pressure in your upper abdomen, don't ignore it. Please get it checked out because it could save both your lives. Edit. I didn't expect this much attention, but I'm glad that it could help spread awareness for pre-eclampsia and HELP syndrome. Thanks for all the well wishes, everyone. We visited the NICU and I got to change my first diaper today. She also held my finger in her hand, and that felt amazing. Another important thing I want to mention is to understand that it's not your fault if there are complications, and it just happens. Why is not fully understood yet. Feelings of guilt, or maybe even betrayal from your own body, are normal, but you will get through it. Talk it out and seek guidance for postpartum depression if needed. My wife is strongly independent, so it feels very different for her to ask for help sometimes. But it's for the best. Be a team. Tag out and recover as needed. There's no shame in asking for help. More so regarding pregnancy. It's way more intense than normally depicted, and complications and difficult symptoms are surprisingly common. If my story helps even one person recognize the signs and get to a doctor in time, I'm extremely grateful. Answer. Something similar happened to my wife. She works in an office and really can't step away. The hospital kept trying to call her, and she finally was able to answer on her lunch break. The last ultrasound she had gotten showed the placenta was basically done. We went into the hospital and her BP was very similar in the 180s, and blood work showed the same elevated liver enzymes. Of course, I don't think the nurse talking about the risk of losing the baby, etc. helped the blood pressure. It was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like eternity waiting to hear the fetal heart beat from the monitor. Our daughter was born a few hours later. Sudden preeclampsia is fucking scary. Story 11. I was freshman in college and came back to my hometown for fall break. I decided to go to a football game to hang out with some old friends. On the way home, I stopped at a red light, and when it turned green, I pulled forward, as usual. From the left, a truck suddenly hit me. He was speeding and ran the red light, T-boned me right in front of my driver's door. I luckily got out with just an injured knee and fractured clavicle and some bruising. It haunted me for a while that, had I pulled forward just a little faster or he had been just a quarter second slower, he would have gone straight into my driver's door and I likely wouldn't have made it. He wasn't even tipsy or under the influence. It was just a 16-year-old kid not paying attention. Answer. I witnessed a very similar accident recently. The girl who jumped the light was lucky to have neither seriously harmed the other driver, must have just got his license, or me. I was a pedestrian. Her car ended up plowing through the spot I'd been standing a split second before. After almost potentially eliminate a guy, me and my dog, she proceeds to tell me to calm down because it was just an accident. She ran a red light, not a fudge accident. The guy was in shock and she was bossing him around something awful, playing the whole thing down. Shed slammed into his side, crushed his bonnet and must have narrowly missed himself. It makes me angry just think about it again. A moment of inattention and people can die. I still feel anxiety crossing roads with traffic lights, and I don't think that's likely to fade anytime soon. Story 12. My family and I were driving down the highway when we see a stopped SUV in the middle of the highway with a family of 6 inside, and the car in front of us didn't get out of the way until the last second. Story 13. I was working on a pipe crew in 1998. We were installing a large concrete vault in a pretty big hole. I'm standing in a ditch about 6 feet deep marking grade while the excavator operator is digging. So to the front of me is a large excavator bucket, itself weighing hundreds of pounds and backed by powerful hydraulics and thousands of pounds of steel armature. And behind me is a solid concrete wall about a foot thick, and the ditch is only a few feet wide and too tall for me to jump or climb out of with any kind of speed. Suddenly the excavator spins to one side and the arm snaps out to full extension with full force, and the operator shuts it down. The bucket missed my head by about a foot. He climbs out of the machine, visibly shaken, and tells me that something has failed on the machine and the arm wasn't supposed to have done that. So as he's been digging, he's been noticing that, ever so slightly, there's a bit of a delay between his inputs and the machine's actions, and in the moment before failure, he just felt something wasn't right and tried to pull the bucket in. When it didn't seem to want to, he turned the excavator just in case. And that's when the arm extended. Had he not, I would have been crushed to fudge passing. There were 2 other excavator operators on that crew, and they were basically idiots. Had one of them been with us that day, I'm sure I'd be dead. Story 14. Not necessarily a second later, more like a few seconds earlier. But whatever. I worked at a private gun range for almost a decade and had one encounter where I could have nearly gotten eliminated. I was in what we called a trap house, a little bunker that holds a machine that throws clay targets for people to shoot. When we go into said bunker, we put a giant traffic cone on top of it that basically tells people, there's someone in there, keep your shotguns at your side unloaded, and wait for them to exit. One day, I was fixing some issues with a machine and was about to exit. I realized I left my bowl on the back shelf and stepped back and grabbed it. The second I did, I hear a shell go off and the cone on top of the house gets obliterated and falls in front of me. Turns out one of our members had his daughter there and was teaching her how to trap shoot. He didn't realize she loaded a shell when he was teaching her how to aim. Irrelevant cause his gun shouldn't have been pointed downrange. He lost his membership over that incident. TLDR. If I didn't forget my bowl on a shelf, I would have stepped out of a bunker and had my head blown off by a shotgun wielded by an 8-year-old girl. Story 15. Had a bad hangover and was kind of nervous jittery, which in turn made me extra watchful. I was driving home, light turned green, and I started to go. Car going about 45 in crowded city traffic gives no fudge and goes right through the red. I slammed on the brakes and felt my anti-lock brakes engage for the first time in I don't know how long. Guy missed me by inches, didn't even slow down. Had I not been hungover, I doubt I would have given the cross traffic that second look to see him barreling toward me. He likely would have T-boned me right in the driver's door. Answer. I had a similar experience driving home from work one night. Streets were dead all the way home. Approaching a red traffic light that turns green. For some reason, I didn't immediately start accelerating like I normally would, and a car comes speeding through the intersection at least 20 km over the limit. Would have eliminated me for sure. It was roughly 4 doors down from my house. Kinda terrifies me being so close to safety and being 100 in the green, yet someone else's carelessness can completely wipe that out in a second. Story 16. Earlier this week, I saw a young guy almost get eliminated by a tram. He wasn't listening to music or anything, but it was early in the AM and he barely caught it out of the corner of his eye. The first thing he did was a textbook Wilhelm scream, and then he noticed me looking and said, "Well, I'm fudge awake now." It passed probably 2 centimeters in front of his nose. Edit. 1 second earlier, whatever. Story 17. My dad and I were driving down the road after heavy rainfall in Vermont. He is driving, and I am fiddling with the radio. I hear a very loud crack, and before I can ask my dad what it was, out of the corner of my eye, I see movement. An entire tree was falling on the road. Due to the heavy rainfall, the dirt was too wet to keep some trees in place. My dad stood on his brake, cartoon style, and we slid nearly right into the tree. I heard a pop before we fully stopped, and when we lurched back to 0 MP, we were both breathing hard. My dad got out to check the damage, and the pop I hear was a branch hitting a headlight out. First time I've ever seen my dad call 911. It was scary. Could have been the end of us if he didn't stop to chat to the waitress after we left the restaurant to go home. Answer: similar. On my way to class about 2 years ago, middle of a rainstorm, and I turn onto my usual backroad shortcut to get on campus. As I'm rounding a corner, I just watch this really tall tree start to seat, then slowly fall down onto the ground. I doubt the tree was heavy enough to have eliminate me, but it would have really beat up my car. Then last year, I think it was even around February, my parents are both just getting home. My mom has a box of pizza with her, and I'm looking over my dad's shoulder out the window at the tree that used to be over our driveway and ask when it fell. Turns out it came down in the time it took for my parents to come inside with food and groceries, and about 30 seconds earlier, it would have eliminated both of them. It totaled my dad's car, but he had the biggest of the 3 cars, so my mom's only got a few minor dings in the hood, and mine was fine. They took some pictures for Facebook and such, and I can see about digging them up. Edit. Got a couple pictures of the car for you guys, with the tree still sitting on the hood. It was sort of rotten before the snow brought it down. A wasp's nest was in the hollowed-out trunk, but it was still heavy enough to completely crush the engine.